We talked to people who stutter, speech language pathologists, and read the research to know what to do when a student stutters. In this video, we'll talk about what stuttering is and different things you can do to set yourself, your classroom, and the student up for success. This is an important message about this video that you should take a moment and read. Let's start off with talking about what is stuttering. People who stutter and the research tells us over and over again that stuttering is way more than what we see and hear. We often think of stuttering like repetitions. Whoa, 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 what is stuttering? But stuttering includes things we can't see like tension, thoughts, and feelings. People who stutter often describe feeling stuck or out of control. Confidently saying what they want to say using forward moving speech is often a goal we work on in speech therapy. We're learning more and more about what causes stuttering. What we know is stuttering is generally caused by an unstable speech motor system. That makes it difficult for the speaker to time and coordinate movements. There are different risk factors that make it more likely for a stutter to be ongoing. Here are some important facts to understand what is stuttering. First, stuttering is not caused by anyone and is not something you can learn. Stuttering is cyclical and changing. That means students who stutter go through times where they stutter a lot and times where their stuttering happens less. You might also notice changes depending on the environment and who they're talking to. Stuttering is a relapse-prone disorder. That means it's likely to come back if the techniques are not continued. And finally, age and time are important when talking about stuttering. Stuttering generally develops between the ages of 2 and 5 years old, and it can be developmental, meaning some children do outgrow stuttering in their preschool years. Before we get into things you can do, let's talk about what children who stutter have to say. We ask them. This 8th grade student told us, "It's just how I talk. I mean, it's nature and it's totally fine." This 5th grader was so insightful and really told us it has nothing to do with how smart you are. And finally, this 2nd grader described what they're learning and what they wish for. No interruptions and no one telling them how to talk. Okay, it's time for our talking strategies. We have 5 of them. These are things you can do when talking to your student. They're good for kindergartners up to high schoolers. The first is slow down. Slow down your own talking rate in a way that sounds natural, but makes it clear that you're not in a rush. Listen to me do it. To help you slow down, try to imagine that someone is typing everything you say. Slowing down can also apply to your classroom. Try to reduce verbal tasks with time pressure, like who can be the first person to answer the question? The next strategy is adding pauses. Add pauses at the end of your sentences, between different ideas, and also add a pause before you respond to what the student says. Did you hear how I just added a pause? Adding a pause makes it easier for the student to talk because it gives them some extra time for the muscles to coordinate and get their voice started. The next is be a good listener. Being a good listener means letting the student finish what they have to say. Don't interrupt, speak for them, finish their sentences, or rush them. Try to listen to what they're saying, not how they're saying it. Good listening also means not asking them to stop, slow down, or take a breath. The next one is take turns. People who stutter find it easier to talk when they're not interrupted. Taking turns is a great way to avoid interrupting each other. As well, it creates extra pauses in the conversation, and that allows the student a bit more time to get their voice started without rushing. To help with turns, set some clear rules for your classroom, like only one person can talk at a time, or we don't interrupt when someone else is talking. The last strategy is to limit your questions. Questions are a really natural part of communication and also teaching, but asking too many questions overall or too many questions in a row without letting the student respond can place pressure on them and their speech system. Instead of saying, "Do you know where to go?" you can comment by saying, "It's time for STEM with Mr. Stack." Always pause after you ask a question and avoid asking question after question after question. I'll be honest with you, teachers often tell me that this is the hardest strategy for them to use in the classroom. We've talked about our 5 talking strategies. Let's move on to setting the tone. There are 3 ways you can set the tone in your classroom to be supportive of your student who stutters. These may even feel like universal strategies that can apply to everyone. The first one is accept. Accept what they have to say and not how they're saying it. Acceptance means not asking them to repeat, not reacting negatively, and not drawing any unnecessary attention to stuttering. The next is acknowledge. You can say things that are neutral and reassuring, like, "Don't worry, you can try to tell me later," or "It's okay, I have lots of time," or "I'm listening." For students who seem particularly distressed or frustrated in the moment when they can't get their words out, it might be helpful to gently acknowledge that they're having difficulties. You can say, "That was a really tricky word," or "You really tried hard with that one." Remember, always check in with the student, their parent or caregiver, and the speech language pathologist to ensure you're comfortable and they're comfortable with any feedback or acknowledgement you provide. Finally, advocate for your student. Stuttering is not something to be ashamed of. Talk about stuttering like you would any other aspect of that student. Be mindful of teasing and bullying, and manage these situations thoughtfully. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with 6 things you can do for your student, your class, and yourself. The first is about raising hands. Call on the student when they raise their hand, or choose students randomly across the class. Try to avoid calling on students in a known order, like alphabetically or up and down a row or tables. Sometimes, the act of waiting for your turn can increase anxiety and, in turn, increase stuttering. The next is talking about stuttering. Some students who stutter may want to share information about stuttering. This can be really empowering and can help them practice learning how to take charge and be open about stuttering. Talk to the student, family, and their speech language pathologist before openly talking about stuttering in your classroom. Remember, we said stuttering is cyclical, meaning your student can have periods of increased stuttering and decreased stuttering. Stuttering can be impacted by lots of things like being tired, sick, or anxious. If your student seems to be stuttering a bit more than usual, consider adjusting your expectations, like asking fewer questions, asking close ended questions, reading or practicing beforehand. You might also talk to the student about what might be a good plan for them. Talking with stutter-free speech can take a lot of practice. When possible, work with your student to practice presentations by reading them out loud or practicing in an easy situation like just with you at home with a grown-up or with a friend, before harder situations like in front of the whole class. Remember, stuttering is not caused by anything, like a psychological problem or something in their personality. Have consistent expectations about the quality and quantity of work for the student who stutters relative to all your other students. And finally, use your strategies. We talked about 5 talking strategies. Remember, don't tell your student to slow down or relax, and avoid interrupting or speaking for them. That was a lot of information. I hope you have a good idea of what you can do to help your student who stutters. Thanks for watching.